We are looking at the story of Lazarus today. It's a typical story that, well, I should say typical, but it's a traditional story before Easter. It's one of the Sundays that we approach. Easter is this idea of God bringing life to us. And so it fits into this. For some reason, as I was thinking about the story of Lazarus, I had this memory from many years ago of a man when I pastored in Los Angeles. And when he was a little boy, he used to go to this church called Angelus Temple in Echo Park, Los Angeles. And he told me about this church. I was aware of the church, and the pastor of the church was this lady. She was like one of the first pastors in the United States that had this monster church. Her name was Amy Simple McPherson. And he told me a story about what she would do is to bring people to Jesus. She would do like theatrical presentations, and her services were very dramatic, and her church was shaped, very much like a theater and had all the things that a theater has. Super interesting that way. But what she would do, she would always have something new. She'd have guests. And one time she had a renowned atheist, and he was going to come and she was going to debate him on the stage. And so one of his opening remarks, the atheist he says, I know you Christians believe that you're going to come up out of the graves. And but I want you to know that I know when I go into my coffin, I'm not coming out. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the people, the pallbearers, you guys get a hammer and nails, and you guys nail that lid shut. And you nail it as tight as can be. I have no expectation, nor do I want to be coming out the top of it and going anywhere. Well, now it's Amy McPherson's chance to get up and talk. And she says, that's right, but don't waste your hammer and nails on that lid. He's not coming out the top. He's going down the bottom. And he's going to keep going down. So it gets really hot, and that's where atheists go. I remember hearing that story. I laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought of that. But there are these stories, and we're always wondering, all of us carry a great burden, a great weight of life as life comes. And because we know that the death rate is 100%, we know that we have a date too. And our response to that is, then do as much as you can. Live as worthy as you can. Make the most use of the day. All those are good principles, but what happens is they also become a lot of weight. It becomes a lot of stress, and we become anxious with things that are not cooperating with our timeline. And that's something that we see in Scripture from Genesis all the way to Revelation. People have a problem with God's timeline, with God's timing. It's like I told you about a book I never read, but I love the title. God has never failed me, but he scared me to death a few times. And it's that same idea. You go all the way back to Sarah with Abraham. And God promised, you are going to have a child. And this child is going to be the start of a great nation. And it was a promise that even the angels came and gave to Sarah and Abraham. And now she's 90 years old. And she's like, you've got to be kidding. This isn't going to be happening. I've been waiting for a child way too long. She didn't like God's timing, but God's timing was right. You can imagine Joshua. He gets his people out of the desert, and he's standing there at the foot of the walls of Jericho, and this great nation, a city-state, and what's he supposed to do with that? And he's just wondering, I don't know what I can do. We just have a small band. We don't have a whole lot of weapons, if any. What are we going to do in light of this? Well, God had a plan. Get the trumpets out, get your marching boots on. And that was God's plan, completely time-wise, completely different, a completely different set of expectations than what Joshua ended up needing. And that's a common story. Even we find ourselves in this story with Lazarus. The story begins with Jesus. He's on his way to Bethany, where Lazarus and his sisters lived, and he gets word that Lazarus is sick. And that matters, because when you get sick, you want to get well, because the opposite of not getting well isn't too good. Sometimes when we look at art of this and we see Sunday school stories about it, it kind of looks like Lazarus and his sisters are old. They're not old. These are people in their early 20s at the most. These are young people. We don't know what happened to their parents, but obviously something drastic had to happen, dramatic had to happen, because it's just all the way through. It's a story of Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha. And they are worried about Lazarus, who has come down with something. So they send this message, and then Jesus does something very interesting. He says, wow, this isn't good. I'm going to wait 2 more days before I go. And so he decides to wait. And of course, Lazarus passes away. And when Jesus does make it, Martha's the first one to meet him, and she goes, if you would have been here, you would have healed him. He wouldn't have died. Now it's too late. Now he's died. It's okay. We don't hold this against you. We're still good friends. But we do know that if you would have been here, like you weren't that far, you could have been here. I don't know why you waited, but because you waited, he is now dead. And Jesus responds, and he goes very simply. He says, well, but Martha, he will rise again. He will rise again. And her response is, yeah, I know he will. But everybody's going to rise on that day, right? And she kind of turns it into this doctrinal thing. And Jesus is talking to her personally. And he's sitting there saying, no, Martha, it's not about a doctrine. It's not about these beliefs. It's me. I am standing here with you. I am speaking to you. I am the life. I am the hope that you have. And what he's telling Martha in this moment, he says, if you would implant my life into yours, you will have this new life. And not only will you also, like you said, rise on that day, but you will have my life living inside of you, empowering you for every day. And what he implied in that was, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise Lazarus as a sign of the power that is in you. I delayed for a reason. If I had come and just healed Lazarus, you guys wouldn't be ready for my resurrection. Now, that's not what's said, but that's what's implied in this story. But because I delayed, you guys are going to see the glory of God. A lot of us are still waiting for God to act in our lives to do something. Sometimes we're waiting to get married. And it's like, who am I ever going to marry? Who am I ever going to find? Who? And we're just waiting. And it feels like the decades are flying by, and we're just nervous about that. And other times we're waiting for a job to open up, or we're waiting for a promotion to happen. Or sometimes we get so frustrated in our lives because I thought I would be in a place of better financial security than I am right now. And that's really hard out here, right? Because we hear about all these young people who work for NVIDIA, and now they all have $25 million, and you're still at the job waiting, for somebody to buy your company maybe. I don't know. But it's just frustrating. It's like, well, everybody else is passing me up. Everybody else has all the security. Why hasn't it happened to me? What's up with me? Why hasn't God done anything with me? And I certainly get that. I get that frustration. I get that. Why hasn't God already done something? Could he have done it? And then we get to this point where, just like Martha, aren't we? We're like, you know what? Now it's too late. If you didn't have to wait, but because you delayed in answering, now it's all dead. Now it's all gone. I don't know why you did it, but it's okay. It's okay. I get it. It just wasn't meant to be. And Jesus is saying the exact same thing to you and to me as he said to him, oh, hold on here. Hold on here. You're not the one that gets to set the doctrines. You're not the one that gets to set reality. That's me. That's me. I'm the one in relationship with you. I'm the one that loves you. I'm the one that cares for you. I'm the one that's watching over everything. I'm the one that you can depend on me fully. I'm the one that's here for you. It's not a belief system. It's not a religion. It's not a ritual. It's a personal relationship. And Jesus is standing there as a human being in the full sense. Jesus fully 100% human, 100% God. He is standing before you, and what does he do? He reaches out to embrace you. That's the big difference. In the past, in the stories of the Old Testament, God kind of spoke at a distance to everybody or spoke through people. In the New Testament, when Jesus comes, God is not distant anymore. God is there in person to embrace the people as they go through the difficult times, as they go through the hard times. I agree, all of us have to develop our spiritual disciplines. When you become a Christian, you don't just keep going. You step back, you say, okay, that means I have to live my life a little different. And so what you have to do is you have to resource yourself. You have to spend time on different things. We call those spiritual disciplines, spiritual habits, if you will. Some of them are, you have to spend time reading God's word. You have to spend time in prayer. You have to spend time helping other people. You have to spend time, teaching people, discipling people. You have to spend time sharing about Jesus with other people. So all these spiritual habits, but there's one that is harder than all of them. That is patience. Waiting for God's time. That is a spiritual discipline. That's being able to step back and to say, I am waiting on God's time because that's the only way my life works best, is when I wait for God. Now, does God make it easy for you to wait? Oh, no. No, he stretches you beyond your capacity, it feels like sometimes. But again, just like the guy wrote in his title, God's never failed me. He scared me to death a few times. But all of us Christians have stories after story after story about how God came through at the very last minute, telling us to wait. And every story always ends the same. I am so happy I waited. I'm so happy that God didn't answer those prayers that I had. I'm so glad that I waited for God's will to take place. And every time you violate that, every time you jump ahead, you don't have to jump too far before you realize I'm out of God's will. God did not expect me to be in this place. He did not ask me to come to this place. And we try to justify it by saying, but I've got to get what I got to get. But we know that we're running ahead of God. We know deep inside, no, I should have gone back. Well, the good news is because Jesus is a person, we can come to Jesus, the person, and say, Jesus, I got out ahead of you. I got out ahead of you. Sometimes we feel a rejection from God, don't we? Because we've gotten out ahead of God, or we've tried to take matters in our own hands, or we've depended on ourselves, or any myriad of things that we come through. But we come back to God. I've noticed sometimes we'll come to church and we'll feel like, this is the last place I should be. I haven't lived my life in a way that I should find myself sitting here this morning. And what do? We begin to judge God based on our past behavior. But what does God see? God sees that we are in church today. You are in his house. And he is the one that opens up his arms and welcomes you today. Regardless, you are here today. And today is the start of your relationship with God. Every day is the start of a relationship with God. And so today is too. And so God embraces, God welcomes us. And God says, yes, we are here for a reason. And God has a wonderful plan for every single one of our lives. And in that plan is this lesson. You got to wait. You just got to wait. So let's read God's word here, and we'll read it together. I'll read the first verse, and you guys follow up with the second, and we'll continue that. And I'll just hit there at the very end. And of course, like I've said, what's happened is Jesus delayed. Martha came out first, if you would have been here. But then Jesus goes on to explain a little bit more, and Martha says, well, you know what? I do believe you are the Messiah, and whatever you do happens, so I'm good with that. Mary comes later. Mary says, if you would have been here, our brother would not have died. And Jesus empathizes with her, and he cries with her, and he understands, and then that's where we pick up when they go to the location of where they buried Lazarus. And this is where we hit. So I'll read verse 38, and you guys come in with verse 39. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. one of the lessons that we want to learn is learning to live on God's time. Learning to live on God's time. Not easy. Learning to live on God's time. There's a passage in Isaiah 55, verse 8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. And I think we could justifiably correctly add, my time is not your time. My timing is not your timing. That God operates on a completely different plane. He operates on a completely different dimension. His understanding of the big picture is complete, in opposed to our just a little teeny slice of what we see. God sees everything. God sees the giant purpose. God sees the big picture. God sees it all. And that is something that each of us have to begin to understand or I should even say, continue to learn. I don't know if anybody ever learns this once and for all, but it's a lesson that we continue to learn time and time again, that we can trust God's timing with the frustrations, with the anxieties of this life. God knows how to take care of everything. God takes care of us. He takes care of everybody. I can trust him. This idea that the spiritual gifts and the fruits of the Spirit, patience is one of them. Patience is a cardinal belief for the Christian. You have to have patience. And it comes from this understanding that we don't control life. Life is largely out of our control. We can pretend that we control life. We can make believe. We can try to leverage things to make it look like we control life. But in the end, it all comes back to, yeah, I didn't have any control over it when it's all said and done. I was not able to do these things. I don't control life. God controls life. God controls. And in the same way, God controls time. God is the one who controls time. He controls your time span on earth. He controls the timing of all the interactions that happen. God controls how things happen, how documents move through bureaucracies, how the human body heals or doesn't. God controls all that. And it's that understanding that I can depend on God and I can trust God's timing. Regardless of what I see, regardless of what I feel, regardless of the fears that I have, regardless of what I see as 1 + 1, God sees, God knows, and God loves you, and God cares about you. And what does God do? He always maximizes his glory through what he does. When we talk about what does it mean for God to be glorified, if God's going to be glorified in me, if God's going to be glorified in you, if God's going to be glorified in some event, what we mean by that is God will do something through me. God will do something through you. God will do something through the event that could not happen otherwise. It could only happen if God does it. That's what it means to glorify God. It's in God's hands. God takes care of it. God does it. That's when God is glorified. And that's what is happening in our own lives. God is glorified when we put our timing and our lives in his hands and say, I'm going to let God take care of this. He's more than aware of what my stressors are. He's more than aware of what I think is at stake. God sees that and God knows. Another passage that I really like is Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. It says, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. The Lord establishes their steps. We have our own plans, but the Lord establishes the steps. I'm going to agree, sometimes those steps are real far away, but we've got to stretch. We're the ones that have to stretch it out. Say, you know what? This is the Lord's decision. This is the Lord's way. I'm fine with that. I will stretch it out to wherever God wants it to be. I'm fine. I'm going to learn how to do that. I'm going to learn how to be patient. I'm going to learn how to wait. I'm going to learn how to depend on God's timing and be at peace while I wait. While I wait. Be able to develop that ability to say, no problem, I can wait, and I can be at peace while I wait for God's timing. That is a complete dependence on God, isn't it? That's a reliance on God, a reliance that God does not take for granted, that God never overlooks that. But he is honored by that because that's a way of worshiping God. It's a way of honoring God. When God says, oh, you are depending on me to come through for you, aren't you? God loves that, and God always comes through. God always comes through. In one way or another, we always step back and we look, I see what God's plan was. I see what God's purpose was. And why wouldn't we, right? Why wouldn't we? Because God knows the future in and out. God knows all the things. I remember back when both of my parents were passing away about the same time. First, my mother passed away in 2018. Then my dad passed away in 19. My mother suffered from Parkinson's. She had a horrendous passing for about 10 years of the end of her life. My dad had developed a cancer that was a tumor in his eye that turned out to be a liver cancer. And he passed away very quickly. And the only question I had was why? My dad, I knew my mother was going to pass away. My dad wanted to live. He had so many plans. We're going to travel. We're going to do this. Because he didn't have that chance before because he took care of my mom so much. But afterwards, all these plans, and then he goes. And then COVID hits. And then my mother-in-law, Ami's mom, she also had cancer during that time. She passed away in the middle of it. And I'm like, okay, God, there's a part of me that was saying, I'm glad you took them before COVID. I'm glad that they didn't have to go through that. What a nightmare. And I have other friends whose parents and grandparents had to pass away in nursing homes where they weren't allowed to go into the nursing home, and they would hold big posters outside. I remember going to Stanford Hospital, and families would be gathered out where that big ball is, and they would hold up signs hoping that their friends would see them. And I didn't complain. I said, my heart goes out to everybody here. But God's timing. I understand that I didn't know. And there's a part of that I look back over my life, and I just say that over and over and over. There's a time in our own church, back when our church met on Alum Rock, near the top of Alum Rock, and we needed a new building. We needed to expand the ministry. What are you going to do? And God, through the work of a lady in the church, opened up 7 acres. Why can't you build a church on 7 acres, right? On Capitol and Mulberry. And it was fantastic. And the church owned it. And everything's going to be great. But then the city said no. And then the church said, okay, we'll wait for God's timing. They waited 14 years. 14 years sitting on that property. Can you imagine the patience involved in that? They could have turned around and sold it, but they says, no. God brought us this property for a purpose, and we're going to let God's purpose take place in this. And they were so patient. And then one day, 14 years later, a developer calls and says, hey, I sure would like to have those 7 acres to build a condo unit down there. And I have 51 acres over here in this new area called Evergreen. And you guys I'll trade you for that, plus another bunch of money. And the church said, well, I don't know. Seems like this is an opportunity God has given us. And it was just waiting on God's time. And it was the time to do that. Little did that developer know that the city of San Jose was also talking about changing the neighborhood here into very expensive homes. And so immediately our church moves or owns this property. And now how are we ever going to get enough money to build? And all of a sudden, everybody and their brothers calling the church, hey, can you sell me of your 50 acres? Can you sell me some of it? And the church sold 40 of it. We have 10 acres. And with that, that's how this entire campus was built, off of that. Timing. It was all God's timing. Do you think anybody stepped forward and said, okay, now this is what you got to do. You guys are going to get this, and you're going to sit for 14 years on this, and then somebody's going to call you, and they're going to offer you a bunch of money. Take it, because they're going to give you pennies on the dollar compared to what it's worth, and you're going to be able to parlay that into this multi-million-dollar building. No, there's no such thing. Nobody can predict the future like that. But what did the church do? They waited on God's time. You know, there's a benefit to waiting. There's a benefit sometimes to letting struggles mature, to letting struggles develop. We don't see that. I've made that mistake many times when I have acted quickly to end what I thought was a struggle. But after I interfered and after I sped things along, I look back and I said, my changes really weren't in the best interest of the church. Probably what I should have done was go back and just let it sit for a bit. I should have just waited it out. I should have just let some time go by. Let it mature a little bit. Let's talk about these struggles. Let's deal with these struggles. Let's really see what could happen from that. I can't say I live life perfectly now, but I do have that in my head now, it's not a bad thing. If you don't see God's timing, if you don't see God moving, it's not good to step in and take care of things on your own. It's always best to sit back and say, okay, God, this is in your hands. I'm going to let you figure this out and let you lead us and guide us in this beautiful way. And every time you do, God comes through for you in a powerful way, every time. God is so good that way. Another passage that I really like is Psalms 130, verse 5. I wait for the Lord, my whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I wait for the Lord, my whole being waits, and in his word I put my hope. I don't think I've ever read a story in the Bible where somebody had to catch up to what God was doing. I don't think I have. Maybe some of you guys could correct me on that. Everything seems to be that we get ahead of God. The stories I'm familiar with, even in my own life, is I got ahead of God. Waiting seems to be hand and glove with how God acts. To make sure that we are waiting. God, in his timing, is never late. He is never late. And I want to tell you, he's never too early either. He's just right on time. He's just right on time. I had an experience where I was building a church in Maine, and I'd run out of all the money that I had. It was a very little bit amount of money. And I was going to take the workers in the church who were building it. We're probably like 80% done with the building. And I was just going to take them to lunch, as I would do often. It was just a few workers. And I was going to tell them. I said, well, I'm sorry, you guys. That's the end of that. I wish I could have given you guys several weeks' notice, but I didn't. And I held my hope out that the money would come through. And so as I was walking to their house, I stopped by the mailbox, opened it up, and there was a letter in there from an aunt of mine. And this aunt that I barely knew, she wasn't like my aunt, she was like my parents' aunt and even more distant than that. She had a check in there for $10,000. That was probably about 10% of what this building costs. So you know how long ago it was. And it was like, you've got to be kidding. What on earth is this? As I was going to tell the guys that they can't work anymore, I'm sitting there holding this check saying, oh no, we can keep going. We can keep going. And then I got a phone call from a friend of mine. And he said, Greg, did you apply for a grant because you have a church of minorities? And I said, ugh, I knew I was going to get caught for that. Because I didn't have minorities. What I had was French Canadians. This is in Maine. You know, well, they could be a minority, right? Why not? Can you believe they honored that grant? And they sent me $10,000 because of the French Canadians. I've never loved French Canadians so much. I go, look at this, you guys are the best. And I had enough money to finish the building. It was God's time. Why did God wait until the exact last minute? The moment? Really, God, you couldn't have talked to my aunt a month earlier? You couldn't have, like that grant, I'd applied for that like 3 years earlier? What on earth is this? No, that's God's timing. That's how God does it. God knows, God has a reason, and God always takes care of everybody. You can depend on God. I was watching on YouTube, and I'm sure you guys have had this experience. Maybe you haven't. Okay, you guys are more productive than I am. And it was a video of this guy painting. And I'm watching this. I do enjoy that part, those little videos of that. And I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be bad. And he's just like going here, and he's going over here, and he's going over there, just splotch, 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 splotch. And I'm like, ugh, it's not going to be. I bet it's going to be one of those modern art things. It's just awful. I kept watching it, and then all of a sudden he goes splotch, splotch, splotch. And I think, oh, that looks like trees. And then he goes splotch, splotch, splotch. Oh, that looks like a lake. And then he gets his knife, his painting knife, and he goes like that. Oh, look at that. I can see those are mountains. And then he gets the blue, and he goes, and I'm like, oh, look at that. It's a scene. It's out in a landscape. It's a beautiful mountain scene with a lake and beautiful trees. And all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, there it is. There it is. And it made me think about today with God's timing. What I see as a splotch is because of my perspective. I don't know. But what I see as a splotch, God sees as perfect, as necessary, as vital. God has a reason for every little detail that happens in our lives. We don't see it because we don't have the perspective of time. But let us fast forward a little bit and we look back and say, ooh, what an oeuvre d'art. What a masterpiece. What a beautiful thing God has done. That's how it always is with God. You always look back and say, God knew exactly what he was doing. His timing was perfect. God is so good. We say that, we see that in our own lives, time and time again. In this story of Lazarus, who is Lazarus? Lazarus is you. Lazarus is me. Hopeless, helpless, laying there, really don't have control over anything. And here comes Jesus out of great care and concern and reaches Lazarus and brings him back to life. Brings him back to life. That's what Jesus does for you and for me. On this side of the resurrection, Jesus is the one who gives us life. And then Lazarus, even though he's standing up, he's still hopeless and helpless because he's got all these, things holding him down, all the ribbon stuff and wrappings. And so he even had to have somebody come and cut him free so he could move around, he could get around, so he could be who God has made him to be. So even at that, Lazarus is like us, completely helpless. But God knows what he is doing. And God does amazing things in each one of our lives. And it's always pointing to heaven. It's always pointing to the resurrection. God will give us things to affirm us, things to substantiate our belief. And we are able to extrapolate it and say, look, because God did this, 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 and this, and this, I know he's going to do that. And you know what? You're right on the money. I like what Helen Keller said one time. They're talking to her about heaven. She said, oh, yes, I certainly believe in heaven. They go, what do you think death is going to be like? And she explained very simply, this is what I think death is going to be like. I think death is going to be like going from one room to the next room. Except in this case, when I go to the next room, I'm going to be able to see. And I think that's a lot of what it's going to be. And that's what Jesus is talking to us about. Stick with me. Implant my life into your life. I will be here for you all the days of your life. And I will raise you up. I will strengthen you. I will direct you. I will guide you. I am here for you. And when you go through that transition, you will go through from one room to the next. And you will see the glory of God. And you will see the glory of God. Isn't it amazing that you woke up this morning, I woke up this morning thinking that this day would be what I did? Oh no, it's not what you do. It's not what I do. It's what God does through you for his glory. A lot of times we won't see it until another perspective, but never doubt the powerful ways that God is at work in the lives of his children, in the lives of those who love him. We don't see everything, but with faith, we can know that God is at work completing the big picture. And looking back, we will see how he was glorified because we desired for him to be glorified in every area of our lives. Let's take this moment and let's give our lives to the Lord. Heavenly Father,